Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers. Anyone else who's popped in because you are curious about what this is or you have got a bit lost? Welcome, everyone. It is stat time again, where I like to talk about my stats of the month. So I am Chatty. This is my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter. If you are new here, hello. Thank you for stopping by. If you are have been on many a video, or this is your second video, welcome back. Thanks for clicking. So on this channel, I do one shot. There is no editing, so expect chaos and get ready to embrace the waffle. Clink, 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 clink. That was my notebook falling off my lap. Ugh. Because I have my stats all written out, so I can try and use a small amount of my brain and memory recall as possible. So for October, I really wanted to do a lot of kind of autumnal spooky reading. I had 3 readathons I was part of. I had 4. I had buddy reads, but I will be talking through, because I was happy for my readathons to kind of fall into November. I had an October and November TBR. So I'm going to talk about my readathon wrap-up at the end of my November wrap-up, and I will talk about whether or not I read my October-November TBR in my November stats. If you're interested in what my October-November TBR is, I will link the video here so you can go and check that out. So in the month of October, I read 8 books. 2 I do not have here. I usually do a placeholder, but for some reason I haven't done that today, so we'll see if it works without a placeholder. I had The Skull by John Klassen, which was a library book, so it's not with me. And I had an audiobook from the library, which was Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. I also have Bloodmarked by Tracy Dion, which is the second book in the Legendborn, currently a duology, but I believe there are more. It's not a duology. Ignore me. It's a series. Anyway, I read The Witch's Brat by Rosemary Sutcliffe, Coraline by Neil Gaiman, The Tennent of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig, and Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb, which is the final Realm of the Eldling book. Not only is it the final book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, it's the final Realm of the Eldling book. This is quite exciting. So, I read a few rereads this month, which is quite fun. So I had 3 of the books were rereads, which is, I have 2 of them on my shelf, plus the audiobook. So I had Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry was a reread, but I couldn't remember a huge amount about it. Witch's Brat was also a reread. Again, couldn't remember a huge amount about it. Tennent of Wildfell Hall, also a reread, but I can remember this one quite well. And then I had 5 new reads. So that is The Skull, Assassin's Fate, One Dark Window, Coraline, and Bloodmarked. So talking about where the books came from now. So 1 I borrowed from Mum, which is Brat. 2 were from the library, which I've already mentioned, The Skull and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which means that these 6 here on this shelf are all my books that I own: Assassin's Fate, One Dark Window, Witch's Brat, Tennent of Wildfell Hall, Coraline, and Bloodmarked. So I'm now going to, I believe, talk about the sizes of the book. So this month is really, I find it very interesting. I have a whole range of sizes for this month. Usually I kind of get a lot of similar size, but this month we are going all over. I like to link my books to animals because I enjoy that type of visual representation. So I have 2 ant-sized books. One is The Skull by John Klassen, which is sort of an illustrated chapter book. It's sort of set a little bit like a picture book, and like he does a lot of his picture books, but there's so much of the story, it is more chapter book than picture book. And Witch's Brat, which is a middle grade, obviously it's sorry, fluffing all the words, which is a middle grade, and it comes in at sort of just over 100 pages. I think it's like 111 or something. So an ant is anything that is under 150 pages. I'm not entirely sure how many pages The Skull has, But because most of it is illustration rather than text, I kind of clarify it that way. So 2 ant-sized books. I then have 2 mouse-sized books. Just mentally reviewing what my other mouse-sized book is. Hold on one moment. Yeah, my 2 mice are Coraline. So this is a book that is over 150 pages but below 300, and I think this was just over 100. Yeah, this is 180 pages. And Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is under 300 pages but not far off 300 pages, but both of those are mice-sized books. I have 1 goat, which is 301 to 400 pages, and 1 Dark Window is just slightly short of 400 pages. The Tennent of Wildfell Hall is a cow-sized book, which is 401 to 500 pages, and it is just short of 500 pages. Bloodmarked is an elephant, which is a book that is over 501 pages to 700 pages, and I think Bloodmark came in, so it's about 550, 560 pages. But the biggest book is a blue whale. We have Robin Hobb with 700 to 900 pages with Assassin's Fate, and I'm pretty sure this is 850. Yeah, 852. So a whole range of books there. Assassin's Fate did bob slightly over into November, but that's because I was pausing for my video to read it all at the right time, but the majority of it was read in October. So in terms of the format, again, I've already spoken about this briefly. I have 1 audiobook, which is Roll of Thunder, 1 sort of highly illustrated book. I'm calling it an illustrated chapter book because I think it's more chapter than a picture book, but it is full of illustrations. Illustrated novel, I'm not sure what it is, but anyway, that was The Skull by John Classon, and 6 books which are all novels. I read 3, possibly 4 books which were middle grade. So that's Witch's Brat, Coraline, The Skull, and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry also is often classed as young adult, just because it's one of those books that could be high-end middle grade, lower-end young adult, just because it has got a lot of heavy content in there. But I think if you have a middle grade reader who is being supported with reading those topics and can cope with the maturity of it, I definitely think it has that vibe of a middle grade. You definitely have this really accessible character. There's a lot of accessible themes in there that I think is great for middle grade children to be able to access, but it varies on the child. So with that in mind, 2 YA, possibly 3, depending where you would put Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Other 2 YA books are 1 Dark Window and Bloodmarked. And that leaves me with 2 adult books, which are going to cause an avalanche. The Tennent of Wildfell Hall and Assassin's Fate. In terms of reading global majority books, I read 2, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry and Bloodmarked. The other 6 are white Western centric books. So that is The Skull, Assassin's Fate, The Tennent of Wildfell Hall, Witch's Brat, Coraline and 1 Dark Window. So in terms of my goals, not great. It's a quarter of my reading being global majority rather than half, but I just need to keep trying and striving, because sometimes my goals then cancel out other goals that I have, and all we can do is our best. I just really like to be aware of what I'm reading, so that's why I do this. I like to make myself reflect and be aware. I'm gonna have a little look at the genres. So again, I've got some, just like with the age group categories, I've got some that kind of fit into more than one. So I've read 2 classic books. The Tennent of Wildfell Hall is a classic, and also Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is a classic. I feel at some point Coraline could be put in there, but I don't know when classics become classics, but I think that is a very prominent example of a children's horror story. I have 2 historical fiction books. She says, why have I got brackets historical fiction? Oh yeah. Didn't see Witch's Brat lurking here. Witch's Brat is historical fiction, and also Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is historical fiction as well. So Roll of Thunder kind of fits into 2 different categories there. Fantasy, we have 3 books, but possibly 4. Whoop. Hold on, it's coming. Okay, so I have 3 fantasy: Assassin's Fate, One Dark Window, and Bloodmarked. But you could also put the skull in there as well, because it is based on a legend, a kind of folk tale. And I always think folk tales are very fantastical. It also involves the character, which is a skull. However, there is also an element of horror within the skull as well. It definitely gives me really spooky vibes, and Coraline is a horror book. So 2 horror, which is so weird for me to be saying because it is not the genre I read. So 1 to 2 horror, 3 to 4 fantasy, 1 to 2 historical fiction, and 1 to 2 classic, because of all our genre blending books I have this month. In terms of series, this was a pretty good month. So I have Bloodmarked, which means I'm now up to date in the Legendborn cycle. There are currently no more books out at the moment. I started One Dark Window. It is a duology. The second book, Twisted Crowns, I believe is now out. However, I will not be finishing the series, so that is being parked and not being marked as started. So it's not adding to my series list. And I finished. I finished The Fitz and the Fool, which also means I have finished The Realm of the Elderlings, which is very exciting and also quite bittersweet. So this feels like a big achievement, even though I was counting them all in their own kind of like smaller series. So I was only kind of counting The Fitz and the Fool because I was saying I finished after each one rather than having The Realm of the Elderlings on my list of series for a very long time. Still very exciting. And Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is actually part of a book series. It's part of a series called the Logan Saga. I believe it is the 2nd book published. I believe there was a book prior to Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry that was published. I don't know if it was a fully fledged novel or if it was a novella, because it's a mixture of novellas and novels within that series. But I'm not counting it as started because I will be restarting that series because I really want to get the whole, because it was an audiobook that I borrowed from my library. I really want to get a physical copy of the whole of the Logan Saga, which feels quite hard to get hold of in the UK. I don't know why. I think it's the novellas that are really tricky to get hold of, and I really want a matching set. I know which set I want, and I really hope that at some point in 2024 I can get that. And then I will be either reading the series chronologically in terms of the events that happened, or I will be reading them in publishing order. I haven't quite decided yet. So for now, it's not adding to my series because I will be restarting that one. And I think that's all of them. In terms of me completing my Read What You Own challenge, I here have 5 books that can be used to knock off on that. So obviously 2 came from the library, so they would not be counting. The Tennent of Wildfell Hall was a reread that I was not counting. So while The Witch's Brat is a reread, it was one of the books I borrowed from Mum in order to read, and I have it in my house to read it. So I included that within the Read What You Own challenge. In terms of diversity, for physical disability, I have The Witch's Brat, and also in Assassin's Fate, there is a character who appears very physically different to a lot of her contemporaries. So although she hasn't got a sort of like a physical disability, she is kind of treated like she has one within that. So I have included her throughout the whole of talking about the Fitz and the Fall trilogy. I kind of have included that because I think she goes through a lot of very similar things. In terms of grief and trauma and mental health, we have a lot of grief and trauma explored in Assassin's Fate. Not so much in the other ones. There are a lot of traumatic things that happen in Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, but that's not really explored. This is very much told from Cassie Logan's perspective, and she thinks very much to the child. So while she sees injustice, while she sees hurt, while she sees pain, she herself is not struggling with any kind of emotional or mental health difficulties, which is where I kind of clarify if the protagonist is that, or if the themes are being explored in the story. So I'm not counting that one, but I am counting the Tennent of Wildfell Hall. We do see emotional abuse in this book. We also see alcohol abuse as well in this book. So that one is included. In terms of LGBTQ plus representation, possibly. So when I talk about reading a book with LGBTQ plus representation, I don't mean side characters and minor characters. I am focusing on if there is a protagonist in there. And in Bloodmarked, although Bree is a protagonist and everything's told from Bree's point of view, I do feel there are main characters that kind of surround her. So you have Sal, you have Nick. In this book as well, I also feel you have William. He kind of disappears in the middle a little bit, but I think definitely at the beginning he very much feels like one of the main characters, and towards the end. With William, if we're looking at William as a main character, then I would say yes, this has LGBTQ plus representation, which was Bloodmarked. I don't know if I said that. In terms of global majority, I read 2 books by Black authors, which is Bloodmarked and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And that was kind of the only global majority represented in my books this month. Want a better word. Okay, so that's all the stats. I also didn't talk about that in terms of rereading more middle grade. Half of my books this month were middle grade. So I'm aiming for a third. So that's great. Doing great with the middle grade, not so great with the global majority. Doing pretty well with reading what I own, and doing pretty well with finishing series. So I'm happy with that. My least favourite book of the month, if you have seen my wrap-up videos, which I will link here, you'll not be surprised to know that it is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillick. This book just didn't work for me. I didn't really have fun reading it. I didn't really care. I couldn't connect with the characters. On paper, all of the kind of the tropes and the plot points and things in here should have made me excited. It should have been enjoyable, but it just missed the mark for me. It just felt quite bland, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint why. So unfortunately this was not the book for me, but I do know a lot of people who really enjoyed it and had a great time. So do not just be put off by my opinion, but for me this was my least favourite because I did not enjoy it. My favourite. Now usually I say I don't count rereads, and I stand by that because I think they have like an extra, they kind of have, I feel like they have extra stakes in it because they're a reread, because they're already beloved by you and you get a different reading experience when you read something for a second time rather than brand new. However, the only one that I'd be counting under that is the Tennent of Wildfell Hall because I remember it so well. There was a lot of Witch's Brat and there was a lot of Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry that I could not recall. I very much read those as a child. It was many years ago, so I will be including them in this. So my favourite books, oh what a surprise, it's a hob, but also Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. I cannot stop talking about how amazing Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is. It was such a powerful book. I love talking about it. I cannot wait to read the rest of the Logan family saga. I thought Mildred D. Taylor's writing was fabulous. I was drawn into the story. The characters had my heart. I felt so much. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of worry. You wished them joy. There was so much in that book. It dealt with a lot of heavy topics. It dealt with a lot of interesting themes, but it still made them very accessible for a younger audience. I loved it. I also loved Assassin's Fate. I feel that Hobb brought this entire series to a very beautiful close. Her world building is exceptional. Her characters make you absolutely cry. You feel like you would, you know, you feel you bleed when they bleed, you sweat when they sweat. You just feel that you would go through pain for them. You just grow so fond of them, which is amazing. But I also really enjoyed the themes that were explored in this book. It was really fascinating seeing all different aspects all pulled together in this. And I still feel there's room for more at the end. But it was so good. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. So yes, my favourites for the month of October, not in November yet, were Assassin's Fate and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. So there we go. That is all my stats for October. Please tell me, what was your favourite book in October? Or did you just have a break from reading that month? Do let me know, because you know I love a chat. And if you have enjoyed hearing about all my stats, why not give this video a little like, because that's always nice. Happy reading, everyone.